How the Piloses evolved skinny noses. These animals are called Piloses. This is how the group of fully grown adult Piloses looked a long time ago, many hundreds of years in the past. They were all Piloses, but they looked a little bit different from each other. Many of the Piloses had wider trunks, and only a small number had thinner trunks. Because these Piloses lived many hundreds of years ago, and Piloses only lived to be about 10 years old, each of these Piloses are, of course, dead now. Here are some different fully grown adult Piloses. These are the Piloses that live nowadays, and this is what the group looks like now. Piloses nowadays mostly all have thinner trunks. Why were there so many Piloses with wider trunks in the group a long time ago, but nowadays there are mostly Piloses with thinner trunks in the group? Why do Piloses mostly have thinner trunks now? Let's read and find out. Many hundreds of years ago, Piloses wandered all over the meadow with their children. They had a busy life. Because they were so busy, they felt hungry and thirsty a lot. They had to spend a lot of time looking for food to eat and water to drink. The food that Piloses ate were called mealybugs. The mealybugs moved about all over the meadow and under the ground. When Piloses ate these bugs, their tummies felt full and they got healthy and strong. Healthy Piloses lived for a long time and had enough energy to have many children. But then the weather became very hot and sunny all of the time, and the ground went from being green and soft to being dry and hard. It's still very hot nowadays. Because of the heat, the mealybugs went from moving about all over to moving about only underground where it was cool. Most of the bugs stayed at the very ends of thin underground tunnels. The small number of Piloses with thinner trunks could eat lots of mealybugs because their trunks could fit all the way to the bottom of the holes where most of the mealybugs lived. Piloses with wider trunks had trouble getting food. They could only fit the tips of their trunks into the holes. Some Piloses with wider trunks got to eat when they found mealybugs that were moving about near the top. But other Piloses with wider trunks did not eat anything at all. The small number of Piloses with thinner trunks were strong and healthy because of all the bugs they were eating. Some Piloses with wider trunks were able to reach a small number of bugs, so they were kind of healthy too. But other Piloses with wider trunks couldn't get any food, so they became weaker and weaker and felt more and more tired. They did not have any energy at all. The small number of Piloses with thinner trunks were very healthy, so each of them lived for a long time and had enough energy to have many children. These children were born with thinner trunks because children were usually born with the same kind of trunks their parents were born with. Some Piloses with wider trunks were very weak. They were so unhealthy that they died before having any children. But other Piloses with wider trunks were only healthy enough to have one child. And that child was born with a wider trunk because its parents were born with wider trunks. Many years went by. Time moved on. Piloses who had been healthy enough to have children after the weather became very hot got old and died. But their children grew up to be adults. Of course, they still had the same kind of trunk that they were born with because that stayed the same their whole life. With the children fully grown and their parents gone, the group of Piloses looked different than it had in the past. There were still a lot of Piloses with wider trunks because there had been so many with wider trunks before the weather became very hot. But because Piloses with thinner trunks had been healthier and had a lot of children each, there were more Piloses with thinner trunks than before. Time passed and the same events happened again. Piloses with thinner trunks got more mealybugs to eat, so they were healthier and each had many children born with thinner trunks just like they were. Although there were a lot of Piloses with wider trunks, they were less healthy. If they were able to stay alive, they only had one child born with a wider trunk just like they were. So many years later, when all of these children had grown up and their parents had gotten old and died, the group looked different. So at that time, there were actually a few more Piloses with thinner trunks than Piloses with wider trunks. And then this cycle happened again and again. Piloses with thinner trunks got more food, so they were healthy enough to have lots of children who were born with thinner trunks like they were. These children then grew up to be adults with thinner trunks and had lots more children. Piloses with wider trunks had trouble getting food, so they were less healthy and had less children. Over time, in many cycles, there came to be mostly Piloses with thinner trunks in the group, even though there had been so many with wider trunks in the group before the weather became very hot. And that's how Piloses went from being a group of animals with mostly wider trunks a long time ago to how they look nowadays. That's why Piloses mostly have thinner trunks now. That's how Piloses evolved skinny noses. The end.